Enjoy Your Symptom by Slavoj Žižek, read by Christopher Cote. 22:03:31, 4:58 p.m. Montreal, Quebec. Preface to the Routledge, Class 6 edition. Enjoy your symptom, or your fetish. There are two ways to understand the thesis that we live in a post-ideological world. Either we take it in a naive post-political sense, finally liberated from the burden of great ideological narratives and causes. We can dedicate ourselves to solving pragmatically real problems. Or, in a more critical way, as a sign of today's predominant cynicism, today's power no longer needs a consistent ideological edifice to legitimize its rule. It can afford to state directly the obvious truth. Search for profits, brutal imposition of economic interests. According to the second reading, there is no longer a need for refined procedure of idéologie critique, for a symptomal reading that detects the faults in an ideological edifice. Such a procedure knocks on an open door, since the thoroughly cynical power discourse concedes all this in advance, like today's analysant, who calmly accepts the analyst's suggestion about his innermost obscene desire, no longer being shocked by anything. Is this, however, effectively the case? If it is, then idéologie critique and psychoanalysis are today ultimately of no use, since the wager of their interpretive procedure is that the subject cannot openly admit and really assume the truth about what he is doing. However, psychoanalysis opens up a way to unmask this apparent proof of its uselessness by way of detecting, beneath the deceiving openness of post-ideological cynicism, the contours of fetishism, and thus to oppose the fetishist mode of ideology, which predominates in our allegedly post-ideological era, to its traditional symptomal mode, in which the ideological lie which structures our perception of reality is threatened by symptoms qua returns of the repressed, cracks in the fabric of the ideological lie. Fetish is effectively a kind of envers of the symptom. That is to say, symptom is the exception which disturbs the surface of the false appearance, the point at which the repressed other scene erupts. While fetish is the embodiment of the lie which enables us to sustain the unbearable truth. Let us take the case of the death of a beloved person. In the case of a symptom, I repress this death. I try not to think about it, but the repressed trauma returns in the symptom. In the case of a fetish, on the contrary, I rationally fully accept this death, and yet I cling to the fetish, to some feature that embodies for me the disavowal of this death. In this sense, a fetish can play a very constructive role of allowing us to cope with the harsh reality. Fetishists are not dreamers lost in their private worlds. They are thoroughly realists, able to accept the way things effectively are, since they have their fetish to which they can cling in order to cancel the full impact of reality. There is a wonderful early short story by Patricia Highsmith, Button, about a middle-class New Yorker who lives with a mongoloid 9-year-old son who babbles meaningless sounds all the time and smiles, while saliva is running out of his open mouth. One late evening, unable to endure the situation, he decides to take a walk on the lone Manhattan streets, where he stumbles upon a destitute homeless beggar who pleadingly extends his hand towards him. In an act of inexplicable fury, the hero beats the beggar to death and tears off from his jacket a button. Afterwards, he returns home a changed man, enduring his family nightmare without any traumas, capable of even a kind smile towards his mongoloid son. He keeps this button all the time in the pocket of his trousers, a perfect fetish, the embodied disavowal of his miserable reality, the constant reminder that once at least he did strike back against his miserable destiny. In psychiatric circles, there is a story told about the man whose wife was diagnosed with acute breast cancer and died 3 months afterwards. The husband survived her death unscathed, being able to talk coolly about his traumatic last moments with her. How? Was he a cold, distanced monster? Was he a cold, distanced monster with no feelings? Soon, his friends noticed that, while talking about his deceased wife, he always held in his hand a hamster, her pet object, his fetish, the embodied disavowal of her death. No wonder that, when, a couple of months later, the hamster died, the guy broke down and had to be hospitalized for a long period, treated for acute depression. So, when we are bombarded by claims that in our post-ideological cynical era, nobody believes in the proclaimed ideals, when we encounter a person who claims he is cured of any beliefs, accepting social reality the way it really is, one should always counter such claims with the question, okay, but where is your hamster? The fetish which enables you to pretend to accept reality the way it is?